I was working peacefully as a cleaner at a small-town hotel. One day, the hotel suddenly became chaotic.
Is there a doctor here?
Someone shouted. Apparently, a male guest had collapsed. A woman who seemed to be a nurse stepped up, but she looked like she was reaching her limit. I hesitated. Though, I couldn't just stand by and do nothing. With trembling hands, I stepped forward. I regained my composure and assessed the situation. Working together with the nurse, we managed to save the man's life. Before I could even catch my breath, I was greeted by police officers waiting for me outside the hotel.
You're Ken Brown, right? We need to ask you some questions.
My heart pounded at those words. My name is Ken Brown. I'm a hotel cleaner now, but I used to be a doctor. My parents always taught me to stay humble and calm no matter what. Maybe that's why I've never liked being in the spotlight. When I started working at a university hospital, the expectations placed on me were overwhelming. People called me a genius, and the pressure nearly crushed me. The harassment born out of jealousy was also hard to bear. It was after one particular surgery that I decided to quit. My parents didn't get mad, they understood. After taking some time to rest, I started looking for a job unrelated to medicine. That's how I ended up as a cleaner at this small-town hotel. Nobody knows who I am here. That feels good. However, I sometimes remember the tension in the operating room. The joy of saving a patient's life. Whenever those memories resurface, I take a deep breath. Right now, I want to cherish these peaceful days. I've gotten used to my job at the hotel, and I've started to enjoy the anonymity. Even though the busy season is still hectic, I've developed a habit of taking a break in the nearby park with a cup of coffee. One day, as I sat on the bench as usual, a cute, gentle-looking woman approached me. Her name was Emily Anderson. Apparently, she had often seen me relaxing there. After that, we occasionally ran into each other. Even though we didn't share much about ourselves, our conversations seemed to flow easily. Time passed quietly and calmly. One day, Emily confessed that she was a nurse. I was a bit shaken, but I kept my cool and told her I was a cleaner.
Have you always been a cleaner? What did you do before?
Her question left me at a loss for words. I don't want to talk. I need to get back to work. With those words, I left the scene. Since then, I've found it hard to go back to the park. The painful memories of my time as a doctor keep coming back. Nevertheless, I need to focus on my current job. Every day, I remind myself of that. Whenever I think of Emily, my chest tightens. If only I had been more honest back then. Since that day, I've avoided going to the park. Every time I remember Emily's face, my heart aches. That gentle smile. Those curious eyes. She slowly began to melt away the walls I had built around my heart. Though, I felt ashamed that I couldn't talk about my past. The memories of being a doctor returned like a nightmare. The pressure of expectations, the jealous stares. Moreover, that surgery. Just thinking about it makes cold sweat run down my back. When I was working as a doctor, I learned one thing. Failure is not an option when people have high expectations. Even when you succeed, no one is impressed. When people expect something from you, achieving it is just what's expected. Nothing more, nothing less. No matter what, the hotel work goes on. It's the busy season, and the guests just keep coming. I resolved to focus on my current job instead of getting caught up in the past. One day, as I was working as usual, the hotel suddenly became chaotic. Even from the back room, I could sense that something serious was happening.
Is there a doctor here?
The hotel's announcement echoed, and the staff rushed around frantically. My heart started racing. My hands trembled, and sweat broke out on my forehead. At the suggestion of the other cleaners, I reluctantly headed to the scene. Every step felt heavy as memories from the past tried to pull me back. When I arrived, I saw a man lying on the ground. Worried faces gathered around him. I wanted to step forward. However, my body wouldn't move.
Somebody help.
A desperate cry rang out. I clenched my teeth. I can't just stand by and do nothing. Then, a woman's voice cut through the tension.
I'm a nurse. I might be able to help.
My heart leapt at the sound of that voice. It was Emily. She calmly assessed the situation and began checking on the patient. I was mesmerized by her. It felt like I was seeing a whole new side of her, a true professional. She asked the staff where the nearest major hospital was. An hour and a half by car. Her face clouded over.
If we wait.
Her muttered words caused the people around to grow uneasy. The patient's family desperately pleaded for help. Though, there was only so much she could do as a nurse. A conflict raged inside me. The sense of duty as a doctor versus the desire to escape from my past. Seeing Emily so desperately trying to help made my chest ache. At that moment, something inside me snapped. Nothing will change if I keep clinging to the past. No one expects anything from me right now. That means there's no pressure. The pressure I felt was something I placed on myself. I took a deep breath and forced the words out. I'm a licensed doctor. The staff stared at me in shock. Emily's eyes turned to me as well. I could see a mixture of surprise and hope in her gaze. I asked the staff about the situation and began examining the patient. Just as Emily said, waiting for transport would be too late. If only we performed emergency treatment here. Emily. I looked directly into her eyes. I felt like I saw a slightly more confident version of myself reflected in them. We're going to perform emergency treatment here. Can you assist me? She looked surprised for a moment, but then her expression quickly turned serious.
Yes, I can.
Those words awakened the instincts of a doctor within me. I asked the staff to gather what we needed and arranged for an ambulance. Then, Emily and I began the procedure. We were perfectly in sync. It felt like we had been partners for years. The tension was high, and I could almost hear both of our breathing. As we worked, I was impressed by her skill. Her calmness and precise decisions eased my anxiety bit by bit. Almost there. She nodded at my whispered words. At that moment, our eyes met. There was a deep trust between us, and something else, something I couldn't put into words. Finally, the treatment was successful, and the patient stabilized. We both sighed in relief. Voices of relief echoed around us. The ambulance arrived, and I explained the patient's condition to the paramedics. As we watched the ambulance drive away, I felt a bit lighter. It had been a long time since I felt this way. The fulfillment of saving a life. Moreover, there was Emily. It felt surprisingly natural to have worked alongside her. I turned to thank her. In that moment, my body froze. There were several police officers standing at the hotel entrance. One of them began walking toward me.
You're Ken Brown, right? We'd like to ask you a few questions.
Those words sent alarm bells ringing in my head. Was my past finally catching up with me, or? Emily stood by my side, looking at me with worried eyes. I tried to give her a reassuring smile, but I couldn't pull it off. What was about to happen to me? What would happen to the peaceful life I had just found and my relationship with Emily? As anxiety washed over me, I took a deep breath and turned to face the officer. My heart pounded in response to his words. Flashes of past memories raced through my mind like a movie reel. Though, I have to stay calm now. Yes, I'm Ken Brown. Is something wrong? I tried to answer as calmly as possible. The officer studied my expression.
Actually, we'd like to ask you about an incident at the university hospital where you used to work.
Those words sent a chill down my spine. That day. No, it couldn't be. It's fine. Everything will be fine.
You still have your medical license, correct?
The officer continued. Yes, I do. I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. The officer's expression softened a bit.
I see. There's been some information suggesting that there was a medical error in one of your past surgeries.
At that moment, Emily stepped in front of me.
Wait a minute.
There was a trace of anger in her voice.
This man just saved a patient's life. There's no way he made a medical mistake.
I was taken aback by her passionate defense of me. She barely knew me, yet she believed in me so strongly. The officer looked a bit confused.
I'm sorry, but this is part of an ongoing investigation.
Do you have any evidence?
She pressed.
It's unacceptable to accuse someone based on vague reasons.
I stood there, looking at her back. Her strength made my chest tighten with emotion. The officer seemed to be deep in thought.
Since this was a voluntary interview, we'll reach out to you again at a later time.
With that, they left. As we watched the police car drive away, Emily and I stood in silence. The people around us were buzzing, unsure of what had just happened. After a moment, I turned to Emily. Thank you. But why? She looked at me with serious eyes.
Because I believe in you.
Her words shook me to my core.
Can I ask for some of your time?
She continued.
I actually have something I want to talk to you about.
I nodded, a bit confused.
Could you come to the university hospital? I'll explain everything there.
I couldn't understand what she meant. Did she know something? Her sincere expression persuaded me, and I agreed. A few days later, I visited the university hospital as she had asked. When I gave my name at the reception, I was quickly led to a meeting room. When I entered, there was Emily Ann. I couldn't believe my eyes. Standing next to Emily was Dr. Tom Anderson, the hospital director.
Hello, Ken. It's been a while.
He greeted me with a gentle smile. I was at a loss for words.
Please have a seat.
He urged. I mechanically sat down in the chair. Emily started speaking.
The truth is, I'm the hospital director's daughter.
I was too shocked to respond.
And
She hesitated for a moment before continuing.
I knew that you used to work here. I knew you were a brilliant surgeon.
A whirlwind of emotions surged inside me, shock, confusion, and a hint of betrayal. Noticing my reaction, she quickly added,
But I've always respected your humility and dedication to your patients. I've often been treated differently because I'm the director's daughter, so I feel like I understand how you might have felt.
I listened in silence. Gradually, her words began to soften the tension within me. At that point, Tom spoke up.
Ken, we want you to come back.
I looked up in surprise.
Our chief of surgery is getting older and is considering retirement. We've been looking for a successor, but no one is as qualified as you.
I replied with a troubled expression. But, Dr. Anderson, I'm not sure if I can.
I understand.
He interrupted.
I know why you left, but I don't want to see your talent go to waste.
Emily added.
I've seen you in the operating room. Your compassion for patients and your precise judgment, no one can replicate that.
Conflicted feelings stirred within me. I was proud of myself as a doctor, but the pressure and harassment. Tom's expression grew serious.
There's another reason we asked you to come today.
I leaned in, listening intently.
Actually, after you left, a problem arose.
He began speaking heavily.
There was a doctor named John Carter, who was seen as the next chief of surgery.
As he spoke, anger welled up inside me. John had tried to cover up his own medical error and pin the blame on me. So that's why the police. I muttered. Emily took my hand.
We'll uncover the truth. You didn't do anything wrong.
The warmth of her touch calmed me a little. Tom continued.
Ken, we need your help to steer this hospital and the medical world in the right direction.
I fell into deep thought. I couldn't forget the joy of saving patients as a doctor. However, that pressure. I quietly replied. Please give me some time to think. Tom nodded in understanding.
Of course, take your time.
Before I left the room, Emily approached me.
I'll respect whatever decision you make.
Then she added, blushing a little.
But I'm really looking forward to working with you.
Her words stirred something inside me.
Oh, forget I said that. Well, see you later.
With that, she hurried off, almost running away. Should I return as a doctor, or continue with my peaceful life? I still didn't have an answer. Though, one thing was certain, Emily's words and her presence lit a small flame of hope in my heart. As I left the hospital, my mind was swirling with thoughts. Should I go back to being a doctor or keep living my quiet life? The internal struggle kept me up at night. A few days passed, and I was back to working at the hotel, as usual. My mind was elsewhere, and even my co-workers noticed something was off.
Ken, are you okay?
I forced a smile at my concerned colleague. Yeah, I'm fine. Just got a lot on my mind. After finishing work that day, I sat on the usual park bench, a cup of coffee in hand, gazing up at the evening sky.
I knew I'd find you here.
Startled by the sudden voice, I turned around. Emily was standing there. Emily, I said. She sat down beside me and looked up at the sky with me.
Have you made up your mind?
She asked softly. I sighed deeply. Honestly, I'm still torn. Part of me wants to go back to being a doctor, but when I think about the pressure and the harassment. She gently interrupted me by taking my hand.
You're not alone. I'm here, and the director believes in you. And the patients, they need you too.
Her words made me feel a little lighter. But when I think about John, I trailed off. Her expression turned serious.
They're already investigating Dr. Carter. What he did isn't something that can be forgiven. But more importantly, it's about you returning to the medical field.
I listened in silence. Each word she spoke resonated deep within me.
You know,
She continued.
I saw the look on your face when you saved that patient. That was the face of a true doctor. You gave everything for that patient, and it moved me.
I looked straight into her eyes. The reflection I saw in her gaze looked like someone slowly regaining their pride as a doctor. Thank you, Emily. I said quietly. I'm starting to feel a bit more confident. She smiled warmly. Just then, my phone rang. The number was unfamiliar. Hello, this is Ken Brown.
Doctor,
Brown?
The voice sounded familiar.
I'm the wife of the patient you saved the other day.
I looked at Emily in surprise. She seemed to notice the change in my expression.
My husband regained consciousness. He wants to meet you. Could you come see him?
I hesitated for a moment but quickly made up my mind. Of course. I'll be right there. After hanging up, Emily looked at me with concern.
Is something wrong?
I explained the situation and began getting ready to head to the hospital. She insisted on coming with me.
I was involved as a nurse, too. Let me come with you.
I nodded gratefully. When we arrived at the hospital, the patient's wife was waiting for us. Tears welled up in her eyes as she saw us.
Thank you so much. My husband is alive because of you too.
I shyly shook my head. No, I just did what anyone would do. When we entered the hospital room, the man lying in the bed smiled at us.
Dr. Brown, Anne.
I'm Emily Anderson.
She answered.
Thank you, both of you.
The man said in a weak voice.
I don't remember much from that day, but my wife told me. You two saved my life.
I stepped closer to his bedside.
Take care of yourself. Please continue with your treatment.
The man took my hand.
Doctor, you must be an incredible physician. Please, keep saving others.
Those words stirred something deep within me. Yes, this was the real joy of being a doctor. Saving lives and seeing the smiles of those people. After leaving the hospital room, I turned to Emily. Emily, I've made my decision. She looked at me with eyes full of hope. I'm going to return to being a doctor. Though, her expression shifted to slight concern. But not at the university hospital. I want to work at a more community-focused hospital, somewhere I can provide the care people truly need, close to them. Her face lit up.
That's wonderful, actually.
She hesitated for a moment before continuing.
My father mentioned there might be an option to work at one of our affiliated community hospitals. The pressure there wouldn't be as intense.
I was surprised. Really? That's... She nodded excitedly.
Yes, and I can work there with you if you'd like.
Without thinking, I pulled her into a hug. She held on to me tightly as well. Thank you, Emily. I'm so glad you're here with me. She nodded softly against my chest. In that moment, I was certain. I would move forward, as a doctor and as a person, with Emily by my side. She had given me the courage to take that first step. A few days later, Emily and I visited the university hospital together. When we entered the director's office, Dr. Tom Anderson greeted us with a warm smile.
Ken, it seems you've made up your mind.
I took a deep breath and looked directly at him. Yes, I've decided to return to being a doctor. But... Tom waited patiently for me to continue, nodding quietly. But I want to work at a hospital that's more connected to the community. I want to provide care where it's truly needed, close to the people. Relief spread across his face.
I see. I thought you might say that. In fact, I have just the place for you.
He pulled out a document from his desk drawer.
This is one of our affiliated hospitals. It's a mid-sized general hospital in the suburbs, focused on community health care.
I looked over the document. It seemed to be exactly the kind of environment I was seeking.
You'll be able to fully utilize your skills there. The pressure will be lighter, and you'll find a peaceful life.
Tom continued kindly.
And Emily can work there with you too.
Emily squeezed my arm happily. I smiled back at her. Thank you, Dr. Anderson. I said it with all my heart. I'll make the most of this opportunity. Tom stood up and patted my shoulder.
You'll be fine. Now, let's take that first step forward.
Just then, there was a knock on the door, and it opened.
Excuse me.
The person who entered was a middle-aged male doctor. As soon as I saw him, my body instinctively tensed up. It was John Carter. When John saw me, he showed a moment of surprise but quickly composed himself.
Oh, Dr. Brown, it's been a while.
I nodded silently. Tension filled the room. Tom cleared his throat, trying to ease the atmosphere.
John, it's good you're here. There's something I need you to hear as well.
John's face showed a hint of unease.
Doctor, Brown has decided to rejoin our hospital group, but at a different hospital.
John's expression stiffened.
I see. Congratulations.
Tom continued.
And as for your case,
John's face turned pale.
after a thorough investigation, it was revealed that you not only made a medical error, but also attempted to cover it up. I'm afraid we have no choice but to ask for your resignation.
John collapsed to his knees.
Please, give me another chance.
Tom shook his head with a stern expression.
Medicine is about safeguarding lives. Someone who cannot admit their mistakes doesn't deserve that responsibility.
I watched John with mixed emotions. What he did was unforgivable, but at the same time, seeing him lose his dream of being a doctor stirred a bit of sympathy in me. John looked up at me. His eyes were filled with anger, frustration, and resignation.
Dr. Brown, you really...
His voice trailed off, and I quietly said, "Dr. Carter, this doesn't have to be the end of your journey as a doctor. If you reflect and start over, you can still find a way to serve people again." John looked at me in surprise. Then, slowly, he nodded.
Thank you.
After John left the room, Tom turned to me.
Ken, your kindness hasn't changed. That's your strength.
Emily squeezed my hand and smiled proudly at me. I took a deep breath. It felt like I was finally free from the weight of the past. I was ready to take that first step into a new chapter.
Let's begin your new life at the hospital.
Tom said.
You and Emily will do wonderful things together.
Emily and I looked at each other and nodded with smiles. I felt a great sense of hope for the future. 6 months have passed since then. Emily and I now work together at a general hospital in the suburbs. Life here has been more fulfilling than I ever imagined. Every time I see the smiles of my patients, I'm reminded that returning to medicine was the right choice. I'm grateful for this peaceful work environment, free from pressure and jealousy. My relationship with Emily has also deepened, and we've recently started living together. I realize that I've come this far because of her support. Sometimes, I reflect on my time at the university hospital. I've come to understand that even the struggles from those days have helped shape who I am now. Just the other day, I received a letter from John. He wrote that he's reflecting on his actions and relearning the basics of medicine. Maybe someday we'll cross paths again in the medical field. Right now, I feel that I'm truly fulfilling my duty as a doctor. And I've made a vow to continue serving others alongside Emily, contributing to their health and happiness. With that promise in my heart, I put on my white coat and head to the hospital for another day of work.